And so what I want to do with you guys is just start with some foundations here and just talk about basically what I want to do with this right here, and then we're going to move over to Tony's car, and we're going to come over here to this one here and just do a couple things on it. But what I want to teach you is I want to teach you the principles of metal straightening, and we're just going to do really briefly metal straightening because that's not what this is focused on. And mainly what we're going to talk about is blocking, our principles of mud work, okay? So the first thing you want to do with any panel that we're going to repair, obviously this isn't going to be repaired, and I have another purpose for what we're going to do with this. The first thing we want to do is we want to wash them with water base and wax and degrease. 100%, the whole panel that we're going to work on. That means the marker that we put on there, that has to come off too. And the reason is that there's contaminants on the vehicle. And we have to take them off with both water base and wax and degrease. You ever tried to take bird crap off with paint thinner or lacquer thinner? It don't work, but it comes off with water real easy. So that's the reason. We have two compounds that we're doing. That's the first basic thing that we have to do. The next thing is understanding we're going to straighten our metal. Sometimes, a guy taught me a long time ago, he said, well, if I'm straightening cars, sometimes the best tool that I can have is a cup of coffee and a stool. So look at the dent and look at what's going on, whether it's a structural pull or whether it's straightening metal. And just take a minute and look at it and evaluate, what am I dealing with? We used to have a tool, I don't know if you've seen it or not, I think Jim has. We used to have a tool that we put on doors, that we actually stretched the doors, the skin. Sure. Okay? And the reason was because when you dent something, the metal goes in. So we try to push the metal out. Ever try to push a string? Pushing a string doesn't work too well. But when you got metal that's in and it's pulled the other metal to it, when you're pushing that metal out, trying to pull that metal, push that metal, it doesn't work too well. So we don't have those clamps anymore. I've never seen one in, I don't know, 15 years or more. But what you can do is if a door is in, usually we're going to replace it. But if it's in so far and we're going to pull that out, what it might not be a bad idea is to take a piece of sheet metal, about like this, clean the back side of it and strip it down, 2 of them, clean your door. You don't have to strip the paint. Clean the paint front and back. And what we do is we bond those panels to the door. We sand the back of the panel, but we only clean this with water base and wax and degrease. And then we bond them and we clamp them to there and we heat up the bonding and let it and cure it out. And we do one front and back. Now we can put clamps on that door and we can put a little bit of tension on that. So when we pull the dent out, it comes out a lot easier because we're not pushing the metal. That makes sense? Now you're not going to do that every single time you do one. But if a door skin is in far enough or something's in and you need to pull it out, quarter panels. You get hit in the rear, the gap closes up on the door, you pull on the frame rail, but you can't get the gap back. So you weld a tab to the quarter panel and pull it back. Do the same thing with the quarter panel. Clean it off real good, clean your panel, grind it, bond it, and bond it to there, put some wood blocks on there and big C-clamps, clamp it on there and let it cure out. Now put a clamp on that panel and pull on it. It'll pull that gap out like that. Go do something else. Let it cure out and then pull on that and it will pull that gap out. So just that. Now, metal. Let's go back to this. What I want to show you is every piece of metal has a feature line. Now we call this a feature line, right? But guess what? That's a feature line too. And the reason is because it has a curve to it. It has a compound curve. So this is a feature line. My tips of my fingers is a feature line, whether it's a rounded surface or whether it's a hard line like this. When it gets hit, it does this, okay? When you get shiners through your mud or through your paint when you're blocking it, it's because we haven't pulled that metal back up to the original position. If we don't pull it completely back, we've still got metal that's bowed out. And what I want to do is I want to show you something. So that dent's in, right? If I take a block on there, this is white, so it's a little bit more difficult to see. Can you see that there's a donut around there? Can you guys see the sand scratches? That's this. We just did this. Because that metal is curved, in order for that feature line to go down, something has to give, and the metal around it moves. Now this is still in, but this is high because we did this. This makes sense to you guys? So just taking a DA on this dent and filling it doesn't fix the problem. And you might find that you got little dings on doors and you're wrestling and fighting them. How come I can't get these fixed? And it's because we have this ring around it where the metal has done this and we haven't brought it back up. Now this metal is stretched because of the way I hit it, there's some stretch in it. So I'm not going to want to bring this back all the way up, but I'm going to need to bring it up some so I can bring this down. Does that make sense? Now, the other principle with door dings and little dings like this and hits, if I got a series of them, like we don't deal a whole lot with hail damage, but places that do deal with hail damage. So what we do as body men or paint shop, if you're doing some of this stuff, and you might get into some of this when these guys are buried, we start fixing the dents. What's the problem? We're focused on the dent. We're not straightening the panel. You need to start thinking about, we are straightening the panel. Even if I have 3 or 4 dents, it's not the dents I'm fixing the panel. If we can think about that, I'm straightening the whole panel, we'll actually come out with a better job, right? Does this make sense to you guys? So that's all I really want to go through in metal at this point. You've got to bring everything back out. I have a whole metal straightening workshop that we could do about principles and different tools you can use and ways that you can tell when it's right, and I mean like really quick and easy. And we can do that at some point if you guys want to look at that. So what I want to do now is let's go over to this car, this Subaru Outback here, and let's do some. This back over here, I'm done with it. Okay. Let's wait for Josue to get back here. So, at any time during this, if you guys have questions, comments, or anything like that, just please ask away, because this is about, these different things. Now, I don't know everything. What I developed this workshop from was I was in Texas and I saw some really bad body work. And I saw guys struggling. And I've watched it in all the shops, I've watched guys struggling. So over a period of a year or two, I started putting together some concepts and some ideas of principles. So you can apply these, Tony, or anybody, Taylor, for the paint. You can apply the principles to how to do it. Okay? There are certain things that we want to do and certain things that we don't want to do. So one of the first things, like I said, we should get back here, is we want to make sure that we clean the panel and then we straighten it. So this feature line here, this feature line here, and this feature line here, these are the lines that I want to make sure are right. I don't care what's going on in the middle, okay? So let's say that I'm working on this door here. I want to make sure this line and this line are correct. Now in some areas, you're going to have an inside curve to a panel. We're talking about which to straighten out first. So let's just say that I had an inside curve here, and we've seen some of the feature lines with that, okay? So if I've got an inside curve, I don't care what happens with that inside curve. I don't care. I'm leaving it alone. I care about this outside feature lines and the edges. Do they fit? Do I get those fit first, okay? That's my first concern. That's where I want to focus, is on those. There's a thing called a plane. We want everything to plane in, okay? So that's, in this surface, does everything match this surface? If I bring this up, and I use a straight edge, I use an aluminum ruler, yardstick on here, and I'll make sure that this line is where it needs to be. If it's in, if that line does not come out 100%, I've still got one of these. You get shiners through your mud, that's why. And then what happens with the shiner? So here's the shiner, okay? So what do I do with it? I take my hammer and I tap the shiner down, and what do? We just moved it to another spot, and we're chasing it all over, okay? So we need to remember to get that completely out. The reason I say don't mess with the inside, if I get the outside and I get this planed in, that inside will come out exactly where it needs to be every single time. I don't even need to worry about it. So this part in here, I'm gonna want that line, and this line. If I get these three correct, that one will be exactly where it needs to be. I don't even need it. And the reason I bring that up is because I watched a guy who's a good mud guy. I watched him fighting an inside corner for like a half an hour, and I finally said, hey, you get a pointer here? And once he did the outside lines, his inside went right where it was supposed to be. He didn't realize that. Now, when this right here, your paint is another tool for straightening your metal. You can use it as a guide coat. So when you're getting your metal out, I don't suggest you grind everything off. I'm going to take my block and I'm going to take 80 grit. I think this is what this is, 80 grit, or 120, 180. I'm going to block my metal. I'm going to see how it goes. My highs and lows. We used to have a thing called pick and file. Pick and file was, and a lot of guys thought the file was to shave the metal down. That's not what the file was for. All the file was to do was this, to show me the high spots, so I could knock them down. The closer I get my metal, the better my mud work's gonna be. So once I get this all, my metal work's all in shape, again, that, like I said, that's another workshop. I get my metal back in, and I know I'm ready to go. I'm gonna grind all my paint off, get my surface ready to apply. I'm gonna DA all the paint back with 180 minimum DA. If you want 220, that's fine. But it's gotta be feathered back with a DA 180 to 220 minimum. The old school was I leave metal all the way around my mud. That's old school. The new materials are as much of a chemical adhesion as they are mechanical adhesion. So we can go over paint with the plastic fillers, no problem, as long as it's prepared properly. If you get the edge of your mud that's peeling, that don't stick, a lot of times it's because you got contamination in there. Something's not cleaned properly. Here's one of the other things that we ran just as a side note in the application of mud. We found in plastic work, on plastic bumpers, that's where we've had the most problems. You've had problems with mud sticking to plastic. So we've had the most problem with that. One of the technicians had this idea and he tried it and he showed it to one of my guys and we talked about it. And that was that he took the mud and he put it on, whether it was plastic or metal, and then he took his spreader and he scraped it right off. He spread it on, and he took his spreader and he scraped it off, put it back in his board, mixed it so he had this little skim of residue left on there. He mixed his mud up and he applied it right over there. There's something about having that really thin layer there exposed to the air that reacts with the metal and reacts with the plastic and actually creates adhesion. And puts his mud back on, no problems. Never had a problem with adhesion. So if you're having problems, think about that. You know, just scrape it off and then mix it and put it back on. So we get our metal straight, we get everything DA'd and ground off. Now we're applying our mud. So one of the big problems every shop has is what's called pinholes. And we have various problems with pinholes. Tony does his work, it looks perfect. You get it, you look at it, Taylor says, yeah, this is great, they feel it, look at it, no pinholes. You prime it, all of a sudden pinholes appear. Where the hell did those come from? So I want to talk about pinholes for a minute. Where do they come from? So the first thing is, how much hardener you put in your mud. If you put too much hardener in, you make it hot. Sometimes we make our mud a little bit hot so we can, get it to kick off sooner. Those gases that are created from the chemical reaction, you're using hydrogen peroxide as the hardener in your mud, basically. And they will actually create gases, and it'll create bubbles. Now, if you paint and you put a coat of paint on, and then you put your clear on, and then you go over the clear too soon and you heat it, you skin that clear over and now you have solvent pop, right? Okay? Well, you've been a painter too, so you know this.